All right, folks, good morning again. So let's start something that you know, that is authentication methods, right? Because all of us have been authenticated hundreds of times. Okay, when you enter any office, then you have an identity card, right? And so on, right? Similarly, you are given an identity card. So anybody in campus can ask you about your identity, right? So we have been using authentication for very, very long, but becomes very important when it comes to systems or computers. Okay, all right. As simple as that, in even in ATM machine we use authentication, right? So these are the contents that we are going to look at. Of course, some of these we will study in the next class. So I've just shown is content because authentication, this basic password authentication will be almost covered in 2 classes. Okay. Okay, and almost like 1/3 of syllabus is around authentication in some way, authentication and authorization. Okay, because right now we are talking in general about standalone system, then we'll get into protocols, and then networking aspects of that, right? How over networks or internet we can secure something. Okay, just a minute. Let me mute some folks who are still unmuted. Okay. All right. So these are the references that I have used. So access control is what? It involves 2 steps. First is authentication and second is authorization. Okay. Authentication is your ID card or student card that is issued to you by academic office or human resources department of your institute or organization. Okay, if you don't have identity card, then you cannot enter some rooms. Okay, even in campus officially to the department, and you cannot attend classes and so on. All right. Similarly, in organizations, ID card, because organizations can be very big, then ID card provides some kind of identity, some kind of assurance to people that other people that this person is from the organization. So when you join a company, you will be insisted, or it's a mandatory for you to have identity card visible all the time, or employee card visible all the time. So it's not that you can put it in a pocket and then show it whenever needed. Okay, so authentication is you are telling the security guard when you're entering an office or some premises that you are whom you say you are. Okay, so you are proving your identity, and then based on that, system or security guard will determine whether access is allowed or not. Okay, so authentication does not mean only human to machine or human to human, but also it could be machine to machine. All right. Okay, and what is authorization? Are you allowed to do that, right? I mean, for example, your HR department in the institute will issue identity card only to people who are eligible for that. So only certain students are authorized to attend classes, right? Or certain students are authorized to get into a lab. Okay, so in corporates, in many labs, if you are member of that lab, only you are allowed to go inside. It's there is no freedom of any employee going to any department, etc., right? And certain departments are extremely confidential. For example, as an employee, you cannot go into, see, in general, into finance department, also cannot go into IT room. Just not allowed to get inside IT room where servers are, okay, where system admin guys are there. Okay, so even if you take your authentication thing, like for example card, employee card or identity card, and if you go in say server room, if you're not allowed, if you're not authorized to do that, you will not be allowed entry by the system or the person. Okay, all right, but in general we use this word access control, okay, only with authorization, not authentication. But see, when you say access control, normally you are authorized to enter, right? So but we'll use these two terminologies, authentication, authorization, separately. Okay, the basic problem is that you have to prove your identity to get inside. Okay, so how do you prove to someone that you are who you claim to be? Okay, for example, somebody else can claim to be you and can get entry into the system or to get resources. Now, can you think of scenarios where access control is required for us, for you? Give me some examples.
Use of ID and passwords.
ID and password for system, but real life scenario?
ID cards like Aadhaar or PAN card.
Pardon?
PAN card and Aadhaar card like ID
No,
cards.
yeah, those are ID cards, but where do you, tell me scenario where you use them to prove who you are?
Like while booking tickets.
Yeah.
While in an election.
Elections, right? Yeah, very right. And then everywhere, right? You go to a theater, movie, cinema hall. Okay. Cinema hall, you have a ticket. You buy a ticket. Okay. Does it require ID card? It may not require ID card, right? Okay. Until unless movie is only for adults, it may not require. And then there also they will not check whether your name is whatever, right? Okay. But there are scenarios where access control requires exactly proving you are the person who is allowed. Say airport, you cannot take ticket of your friend and enter the airport, right? It was a scenario 20 years back where just ticket was required. Now ticket is one aspect, what you have, and now what is also needed is what you are. Both are needed. So anybody with anybody else's ticket cannot enter the airport. Okay, same is happening with now with railways. Okay, earlier you used to just buy a ticket and get into system, railways and so on. Now ID card can also be checked. Okay, so that's everywhere. I mean, wherever there's shared resource and you want to use that. Say even for example in bars in US and of course in India too in some places. Okay, I'm sure some of you are less than what is the age of entering into bar where you can take alcohol nowadays? 18 or 21 in India? Anyone? You would have entered without even.
In Delhi, it is 25, I think.
Can't be 25. Alcohol
No,
company will
no.
go bankrupt.
It is 21. It is 21.
It should be 21, I guess, right? And there, I think there has been push by many companies to reduce it to 18. Nevertheless, so let's assume that's a 21. Then you have to show your driving license or something before getting into bar. Okay, all right. Now it'll think of a wedding scenario, right? A wedding is happening and wedding is of some very influential person, right? Then invitation card is not sufficient, right? You have to also prove the identity. Anybody who has stolen the invitation card should not be able to get into, right? So these are some very common scenarios. So we very often need both authentication as well as authorization. So in a wedding scenario, for example, authorization is required because head of the family will decide who all can come to the wedding. That's authorization. Okay. All right. So authentication we have already studied. So you're proving your identity to the system or another person. So Alice is trying to get into a hall or somewhere where all these gold coins are kept, and then she has to prove that she is Alice, and this guy knows that only Alice is allowed and then can let her inside. Okay, so now we can see authentication requires something that a person can prove that she is she or he is he. Okay, it could be a ticket or document or something else she has, for example fingerprints or other biometrics. Okay, and then whether the system will check whether she is actually authorized to get into. Ticket is one thing where she has to prove, but somebody has to say that yes, she is allowed to get inside. That's authorization. So some entity will authorize certain set of users or people to get inside, right? And then she can go inside. So basically these two steps are needed: authorization and authentication. Okay, same theme here in flowchart. Authentication, who you are, prove it, and you are who you are, you say that who you are, and then the authorization say, does this person have permission to access the requested resources, and if so, then you are allowed to use the resources. All right. Okay, so what are the authentication goals? Authentication goal is that if you are allowed to enter and you prove you are, then you are allowed, you can go inside it. So user or principal associated with an identity should be able to successfully authenticate itself, and there should be no false negative. Okay, and second goal is that user and principals not associated with the identity. Say for example, your friend may want to fake you and enter a wedding hall or examination hall. Okay, should not be able to authenticate itself. No false positives. This is very important, and I have used countermeasures to handle this. It so happens that Andhra Pradesh is famous for people faking each other, right? When you go for interview, okay, then somebody else will appear in the interview with somebody else's name. Okay, and then at the time of joining, the person who has not appeared, who has given money to somebody to appear on his or her behalf, will join. Okay, so I worked in IBM, and IBM used to do then reference checks whether actually the person is the person who is supposed to be joining the company, and large number of cases it was found. Large number, when I say large number, is about 10% case it was found that person is not the person who is supposed to join. Okay, among, I wouldn't say 10%, it's less than that, but, and it happens to be very prominent in certain areas of the country where this is a common thing. Apart from that, there's another way of faking. First is that you send your friend, assuming that you want to cheat, and you send your friend to give interview on your behalf. Okay, and the person will, okay, and then you join the company. Of course, the scenario we have discussed. Okay, how do you find out such cases? How do you reduce it right in the beginning, such cases of cheating? Only way to ask, do is that when the person enters, take the photograph, okay, and ask the person to come with passport, and also validate the passport, the photo, and the face. Okay, that's one thing. And the photograph should go back to HR, and the person joins. Again, check is done. That's one way. Second is that there's also possibility, which I was trying to remember, and there are cases where even the identity card name and the identity card is yours, but the photo is changed to that of person who is coming for interview. Then how do you handle such cases? Anyone?
Sir, we should click a picture of the candidate at interview
Yes,
premises.
absolutely. So yeah, candidate's picture is taken, and then HR department will, but it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in large number of cases. That's the reason there are a lot of, after first year review, first year performance reviews, if person has an extremely bad, then case in many companies go to HR, and then say they find out whether this person is fake or not. Okay, but there is a good probability of this happening, and it keeps happening, and sometimes person is not identified for many years because system allows non-performance to a great extent. Okay, all right. Okay, so now we all have mobile devices, right? Phone, for example, mobile phones are personal phones, right? So 20 years back, 30 years back, we never had personal phones, and phones were common phones at home, right? So common phones at home, then you have to say who you are. When some phone call comes, you say that my name is this. The phone call may not be for you. Then you say, okay, hold on, I will call the person, okay, and so on, right? But today mobile phone call comes is only for you. Then what is the need for authentication? Which of the two is true? Malware infection
Sir,
may, yeah,
uh, nothing.
both.
I guess later one is more appropriate.
Yeah, the latter one is more appropriate, but this is also true. See, if you don't have access control, then why not malware get into it? Of course, we are not talking a phone call, but in general, I mean, so the input to a mobile phone is not only by, you have screen log, etc. It can also be through IP that's coming to number of application, right? And then it can infiltrate into your system, right? So there must be some authentication required even at that level. And then of course loss of data. I mean, you lose your mobile phone, you don't have locks, data is non-encrypted, then you can lose everything. All right. And authentication is usually painful. Okay, and this could be really, really painful at times. And then although it is for benefit of users, and like even in the housing complex where I live, there are about 1,000 flats. There must be about 4,000 people inside plus employees put together maybe 4,500 or 4,200 something. Okay, and there is one in gate, one out gate. So in gate, if you're entering, if somebody enters, usually, they are supposed to ask for ID card. And sometimes when some person is asked for ID card, person becomes really angry that I live here for 10 years. Okay, and then who are you to ask me about it? Okay, so authentication, many people feel offended by authentication, and ideally it's not good situation, because authentication is done to help residents of a complex. Okay, but it could be very painful. Okay, if for example you are asked to have a password where the length is about 14 characters, and some of these are uppercase, some are lowercase, special character, and so on, you will also get offended. Yeah, this is too much, right, to type 14 characters. All right, so usually it is not very friendly, and that's the reason people tend to skip these steps and tend to have very simple authentication method, but could lead to a lot of problems. Okay, so there are a number of ways for authentication. Is some of these we have already discussed. Something we know, there is a password, PIN, answer to life questions, credit card numbers, postal address, etc. Or you can address the passport address, passport number, etc. Aadhaar card, etc. Okay, something that we have, like authentication tokens, or mobile phone itself, right, or smart cards, or pins, limited duration pins, right, and so on, that we receive or we have. A ticket, for example, when you're entering a movie theater, they may not bother about who you are, but still you need to show the ticket. And then something we as an individual are, right, for example, fingerprints, voice print, iris code. I don't know what is gate analysis, but something it means. And then place we are, say IP address and geolocation. So for example, what place we are, you go to Nigeria and try to enter president's home, the person, sentry or gatekeeper or security guard, will immediately know you are not from that place, right? Okay, all right. So these things are needed for your proving your identity. So not all of these, but some of these, or in combination. So that we know already something we know, for example, our ID card, etc. Okay, number, or mobile number, address, etc. Something we have is like ticket. Okay. Okay, something we are as an individual, like iris or fingerprint, and what place we are in, like IP address or geolocation. Okay. So steps are simple. In computer, for example, user requests authentication. It does by what? It does user ID and password. The operating system captures the key strokes, and the login program that runs checks information with the stored information, right? So login ID and password is checked, and if it matches, then user is authenticated, and user is then given a shell to work on. If not, then user is not allowed. Simple, that we are using every day. Okay, so now when you use you do some transaction and you get limited lifetime PIN, that's valid only for say 1 minute or something, is an example of what? Something we have or something you are?
Something we have.
Something we have. Very simple. Okay. So this is wrong. All right. So now we'll spend some time on authentication, password-based authentication, because it's the most popular. Okay, all of us are using passwords, and we'll see what are the advantages and disadvantages of having this method of authentication. Now, password, remember the passwords are always secret. Okay? User has a secret password and system checks it to authenticate user. Fine, we all know this. The question is that how is the password communicated? Okay, so you are sitting in your home and you are using Amazon.com. And then you log into your user account, and then you are sending the password, and it's passing through number of routers, or and then somebody may have access, right, to all this. How do you protect them? How do you send the password to the server on the other side, right? Okay, so there is always eavesdropping risk. That's the first thing, that how do you communicate, and then there it can be stolen anywhere, or somebody else can use that. Second thing is, how is it stored? Where is the storing required? You are typing the password. You don't need storage. But how will the server authenticate you? You are of course authorized because you created your account there and given your identity and so on, your address and so on. But how are they going to check that your password is actually that? Okay, so it means that it should have list of users or customers and their user ID, which could be email address, and the password. They should have stored. Now, this password is created right in the beginning when you have created the account. But this password, your password is available with the server. Then how is it stored? Is it stored in plain text or clear, which we call it clear? Or is it encrypted, or is it hashed? Okay, that you'll have to think, and we'll come to this point later. The next question is, how does the system check the password? The process of verifying the password of user is matching, okay, and so on. And next thing is that how easy it is to guess the password. Somebody who wants to fake your identity can also use your password. If somebody can steal your Amazon.com password, change the change the shipping address and so on, and if you have some money available in wallet there, then use that and then ship the whatever merchandise to your address, right? So it's possible. Okay, so your password should not be easy to guess. Okay, and another aspects are that usability has to be also important, because you don't want to type a 30 letter or 30 character long password. Okay, and also if you are using some other mechanism of authentication, for example, you are given a small device which will generate some number. We'll study some of these little later. And then do you have to carry all this all the time? It happens, right? Key fobs are given in many organizations, and then when you log in, you have to look at the number generated by key fob, enter that along with the password, and then you're allowed to enter, right, or use the system. And of course, there can be denial of service. Now, denial of service attack you can also do. Very simple. Suppose you don't want your friend to do a transaction in the bank for some reason. Okay, and if you happen to know his email ID and login is through email ID into banking account, try guess some password. Doesn't work, fine. Try second time, most likely it won't work. Third time won't work, account is logged. It takes hours, right, to unlock it. So you can deny the service to your friend in next half an hour if you want. And of course, social engineering, which we'll study a little later. And this is very, very important, very important. Okay, now we need to model, threat model, how password can be manipulated or can be misused or can be stolen and so on, right? And we'll have to think through how criminals are going to get your password and model security according to that. All right. Okay, guessing the password for a given user. Okay, one person is able to guess the correct password, then can pose as you and use the resources. Okay, the guessing is first method. How easy it is. Okay, and then of course can get into system. Key logging could be another, right? What is key logging? Anyone?
Password gets saved somewhere.
Yeah. So basically you put a small program in your friend's laptop. Okay, you borrow a friend's laptop for some reason or other, and most likely your friend will oblige. And if you want to cheat your friend, okay, put a small program that will record each keystroke and will communicate to you. Okay, that's called key logging, and this is a very common way that is usually bots or viruses can do this work for you. Okay, whatever person types is available. Now you know the user ID and password, because person will always type a non-encrypted form. All these credentials, right? So it's available. Okay, we'll look at some of these. Shoulder surfing, using the same password in multiple places, social engineering, and other methods. So we'll look at some of these in the next class. Okay, so I've sent you one report. There's so every year this survey is done. What are the different ways in which data breaches can happen? Now, what factors contribute to data breaches, right? What cyber criminals look for from all of us? Okay, what aspect of our identity or information they look for, right? So all these, this is 100+ page report I've sent to you this morning. Please go through it. So the data is from that. Okay. So now, of course, I mean, something related to password is this one, that more than 80% of breaches involve credentials. It means that your user ID, password, and other information are leaked in data breaches, which is important for cyber criminals. And actually is the most important. Okay. And other things you can also read is that about 85% data breaches involves human element. Okay. And phishing is top threat action that results in the data breach. We'll look at phishing little later, maybe later classes. All right. Now, number of breaches that involve ransomware is doubled in 2021. See, ransomware is something where cyber criminal is able to get into system of an individual and then encrypted the whole disk, hard disk. And so user is, if you are the user, then you cannot use the system, that all your data files are encrypted. All your important programs are encrypted, right? So Well, hard disk is kind of encrypted, maybe excepting for your OS. Then how can you decrypt it? You don't have key. Then cyber criminal will ask you money, and this can happen to all of us. And cyber criminals can ask you, money in the order of 10,000 or 20,000 rupees, or for big organization, it's usually in millions. And in order to do that, you have to also create your cryptocurrency account. All right. Okay, and the last point here is 80% of breaches involve external parties. Similarly, this survey is available in terms of multiple views or aspects. Same thing, it says that about 85% of breaches involve human element. Okay, because we earlier also remember one diagram where we say that weakest chain in the security is human beings, and the same point is coming here. Okay, and 61% of breaches involve credentials. Credentials is nothing but user ID, password, and about information about you, which cyber criminals can use to use the system or log into the system. All right. All right. And this shows that whether it's external entity or internal entity that's doing crime. It's found out that about 80% over time, you can see this curve. External entities are able to hack your system or get into your system or involved in the cyber activities. But internal thing is also not less. It's almost like 25% or 30%. What does it mean? What is the internal factor? Anyone?
Maybe because of some malware or some
No,
corrupt file in our system.
no. Malware is external. You got it from external entity. Okay. Here, look at the word partner or something. Anyway, so internal here is that actor who is involved in cybercrime is person internal to the organization. Okay, so person who is internal to organization already has lot of access to information. Say for example, in your case, all of your friends email ID, right? Because it's a kind of in a pattern the institute has given it to you. Well, our IT guys may not spend so much time to give very specific email ID, right? It will give you whatever your roll number and name put together or something. So everyone's email ID. So that information is available. Okay, a lot of other informations are also available, right? Okay, your friend may know a lot about you. Your spouse still may know much more about you, right? Okay, and those people can be almost 25 to 30% of crimes happen because of the people who are part of the household or part of the system. Okay, all right. Again, this says that if cyber criminal is trying to get something, what is that thing that they are trying to get? And found out that almost like 60% cases they want your credentials. Then they need your personal information, medical information, bank account, internal, and so on. So credentials are most important. So never share your credential with anyone, even to your close friend. Okay, until unless it's emergency or something like that. Okay, because this 30% happens because of people who are close to victim in some sense. In fact, there have been a lot of cases when disgruntled employee, when they leave organization, they do huge amount of harm, lot of harm to organization by stealing, for example, code or documents or something company confidential information, and many other ways, right? And can in effect plant some bombs, logical bomb. Write a small script and say that 20 days after the person's last day, it will clean all the hard disk. So all these things keep happening in corporates, right? So this is because of these internal threats. All right. How do people pick their password? How did you pick your password? You'll have to think. And because by this, that cyber criminals are after your user ID password. Okay. Answer is that often they don't think about it. All right. Okay, so there has been this case, you read through it. Okay. So what happens is that then in this case, default password was not changed. So it's like this: in 94, an English teenager whose name was Ura's ID was this one, penetrated Pentagon computers via some Air Force Rome lab, right? And started probing about Korean nuclear facility. North Korean, of course, which is #1 threat to US military. Okay, how did he got into this one? He guessed the default password. Now this password, again, in many organizations, for example, a nuclear program, etc., is known to many people. And then if somebody can guess the default password, because in many systems passwords are not changed even. Okay, then there is a problem. For example, survey says that half of the users leave default password in place for their router at home. See, ask your friends, and even in your class, if you ask your people, how many of us actually have changed the router's default password? I have two routers. Whenever they came to install, one is by Jio, another is by Airtel. They never told me about default password, and I need to change it. And only recently, last year I changed the default password to something. It means that these routers, anybody can come to your router, okay, through IP, and then they know default password. Then they can have credentials of super user. All right. So people don't bother about passwords, and every digital device, remember, that's on internet will have a password. Can you request all to mute, please? There's some noise coming from somewhere. Okay. And there have been a lot of survey about it. Yeah, somebody is there. Let me see, who is it? Rahul UV, can you please mute? Okay. All right, I muted you. All right. So, for example, 99% employees use a password. This is password 123 in Dixie Bank, some bank, right? And then it was found for nuclear missile, to firing of nuclear missile requires a password. And then, password was just some number of zeros. Why? Why so? What is the reason? Because they were fearful that if they keep a complicated password, it will be forgotten. Okay. So this fear of losing password was there, and they kept very simple password, which is actually a great threat, right? Okay. And this guy says that I have changed my password to incorrect. So every time, whenever I forget, it will tell me your password is incorrect. So you can be as full as this person if you want to. Okay. So to improve my security, I use two-factor authentication where two factors are needed. One is my social security number and second is credit card number. Note that these can be easily available to anybody. Okay, so which of the following is the most common password in 2021? Anyone?
1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 I guess.
Yeah, so this is, and all these are in top 10, kind of top 10 or 15, heavily used. This is the most popular, right? And what is the probability this will come? Okay, how much time this will require to crack by, okay, suppose cracking requires, you know, your user ID being available, and then the file is available where your encrypted password, a hash password is also available through some leak, and then input that into a computer or system, and that will generate, you know, these kind of passwords and check whether it works, right? And so using this cracking software, 1 2 3 5 6 will require less than 1 second to crack. And survey says that 103 million plus users use this. And second most popular is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. It will require less than 1 second to crack. And then 46 million plus users use this. And then 1 2 3 4 5, 32 million users use this. Then QWERTY, less than 1 second to crack, and 22 million users use it. Then simple word called password. It again requires less than a second, and 20 million people use this. And then 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, 1 1 1 1 1 1, so on, right? And many of you use this very simple password, name of your brother, and then 1 2 3, or 1 at the rate, or 2 at the rate, or all this, right? Which comes from family member's name and something, some extension. It's very simple to crack. Okay. So now the cyber criminals have also, they also gather information about you, your family members, and so on, and then can easily generate a password, okay, that matches with your password. It's very simple, right? Okay. Now question is that how is it stored in a system? A system should have your password stored, right? Only then it can check when you input the password, and it is generally in hashed here, right? Suppose your password is this one, it will be hashed and kept here. Okay, so you have a password, and then it's hash when credentials are created for you in the system, you present your password, it's hashed, and then a string or fixed length is created and is stored in the system. Hashing will study after a few classes, right? So instead of user password, system stores hash password, and when user enters password, it computes the hash and compare with the entry in the password file. Okay, and this has a one-way property which will also study, that from given a password or a string, if you hash, you get hash version of that, right? Hash password. Now given hash password and this function, you cannot reverse it. So if you apply h minus 1, inverse of that, or apply that function, you can't get password. Okay, you can't get password in the reverse way. So what happens, that your password is stored in system in hashed form. Okay, so if your password is say cat pajamas, or unless the password is cat pajama, it will be, this will be hashed and stored in the system. Okay, right? And now in order to verify the password, Alice will put password which is cat pajama, and then system will hash it with the hashing function and match whatever output is there, okay, which HP dash, it will be checked against what has been stored there in the beginning, okay, when account is created or something, or what is whatever stored value of the hash value of the password. Any question on this one? Okay, all right.
Sir, is it possible that like HP equals to HP dash for some pair of P and P dash?
HP is equal to HP dash. Okay. Yeah. Only when this user will be allowed. Now, if the P dash is equivalent to P, only then user will be allowed to enter, use, right? So P dash has is calculated. If happens to same password, only then user will be allowed. Now, you mean to say is that given this HP, can there be multiple values of P dash? That's the question, right?
Yes, sir.
There
Yes.
is a possibility. There's a possibility that depends on what kind of hashing function you are using. And possibility is very, very less, very, very, very less. Okay, we'll see what kind of hashing function you use and how much, how difficult it is to crack. We'll study little later. So we'll study hashing little later, maybe after a few classes, and then we'll see that how to design a better hashing function. Okay, all right. So these points we have already discussed. Okay, so we'll study hashing little later, and then then we'll also study how attacks can be happen, right? For example, there's a dictionary attack wherein let's assume that in a system your user ID is stored and then hash password is stored, and this file is stolen in data breach. Okay, now is cyber criminal now this all is available, right? So user ID the user knows, criminal knows, and we start generating passwords, hash password. Cyber criminal also knows hash function because these are known. This is not secret. Okay, now it will use a dictionary words. Okay, for example, a dictionary word is all words that probably you will use. Okay, dictionary word here is not only number of words available in dictionary, but also kind of names in India or US, and then parents name and all that will include in that. Okay, so it's kind of offline attack. Okay, and then this can be done, and this is very efficient because most of us don't have password which is we can't remember easily. Okay, the next class, okay, we wanted to study this in this class, but I don't think we have time. We'll study about the password salts, how to increase the complexity, how to increase the length of the password, length of hash password, such that it's much more difficult for cyber criminal to break. Yes, we'll study this in the next class. All right, any question up to this point? So first exercise for you is that please change your password. It's very simple. Second exercise for you is that advise your parents. Third advice to you is that change the default password of your router if still it exists, or just change it, periodically change it. Fourth is that try to have a password which is long enough. We'll see that correlation later. Maybe 10 letters, combination of whatever special characters, uppercase, lowercase, such that breaking time goes up to years. Okay, the question is that how much time it will take to break. Okay, if you keep the long string and with little complexity, then it is very difficult to break for cyber criminal, right? That's the reason it is banks advise that at least 8 characters, combination of uppercase, lowercase, and digits, right? Then number of the effort required to break that goes up for cyber criminal. So we'll study that in the next class. All right. Okay. Any question? All right then. Thank you.